and for some reason you need to switch from one institution to another. It doesn't happen very often, but you can do that. I mean, that's allowed by the ACGME. It's logistically a little difficult. But what they are not going to allow is people at one institution in a DR residency to switch to a different institution in an IR residency. And the fear is that there would be these new IR residencies with openings, and they would try to pluck out residents that are already existing in other programs. So they're not going to allow that. I mean, every year there's about 2 or 3 residents maybe total across the country that switch institutions. Really rare in radiology. But they're absolutely not going to allow it to switch at the same time from DR to IR in switch institutions. And I understand their reasoning. So, and then I'll just mention what experience is out there right now in terms of IR. So what do we really know? What we know is in the most recent match, there were 15 interventional radiology residency spots for 15 individuals. They all filled. There were 7 programs total. 4 of those spots were at Vanderbilt. So more than 25% of the existing, more than 25% of the spots in this past year's match were at Vanderbilt. So I know a lot about it. We filled them all. But the bottom line is really, we don't know very much at all nationwide. As of July 1st of this year, there was 1 IR resident in the country. So that's Courtney Rayburn. She's at Vanderbilt. She's the only one. And that's because we had a spot that she could match into. She'd already done her intern year, and she was able to start this July 1 as an interventional radiology resident. All the other spots were people matching to start next year. Now there will be more because people can transfer in. But anyway, there's only 1 IR resident in the country right now, or at least there only was not too long ago. So there's not very much known at all. Another thing I'll throw out there, if you've investigated interventional radiology at all on your own, is not a single person in the country applied for interventional radiology last year. That's a fact. There's, yes?
I was just going to say, when it's convenient, can you take a break?
Yeah, yes. So this is the last slide on IR. So nobody applied to that. You might see some numbers out there that people have applied or whatever. They might say, well, there were 15 spots and 120 applicants. It's totally false. There was nothing in ARIS. Nobody could apply for interventional radiology. They weren't approved until December. They weren't going to let us participate in the match, and they changed their mind at the last minute. So there was not a single person. There was no mechanism. I've seen numbers out there. Even the NRMP posts numbers on that, but it's totally bogus. I have some thoughts on where they came from. But anyway, so we just don't know is my bottom line. So basically we know nothing. So yeah, this is, we'd expect about 50 programs this year.
50? 50? Really?
Probably. Yeah, they're having extra meetings. They've got a lot of applications. They're having extra meetings with the RRC to try to get them all through and approved. So, yeah. So let's do that. Let's break, get your lunch, and then when people are kind of eating, we can start talking about some data about getting into it. Don't be shy.
Grab me one. Grab me.
I just wanted to take a second to say real quick, thank yous need to go out to Christina as well, who is the president of the radiology interest group. She's in an away right now. She couldn't be here, but she definitely wanted to, and I know you guys have been in contact with her as well. And just wanted to say that thank you to Dean Faulkner for showing up and also providing your presence as well. Thank you. So, hope you guys enjoyed the lunches. Is there, do you want anything? Are there any more people? Does anybody? Make sure
I think there are 2
Can I
of
get some
them that
things
are
in?
vegetarian, and the rest are between roast beef and turkey.
Dr. Birch, thank you for providing food as well. I appreciate it.
Is he taking a video?
Probably should.
Everybody have a lunch? I'll keep talking once people have their lunch. I'll keep talking. I can talk forever. Cool. So I'll say a little bit about the match data, because I think this is kind of interesting, and I think it's contrary to what you might hear through the grapevine. I just threw this in, because definitely we've seen this, it might interest you. Number of couples in the match, this is just nationwide. This is nothing to do with radiology, but I always find it interesting, because I couples matched here. But anyway, you can see the number is just skyrocketing. I just bring that up because sometimes people are nervous about it. I mean, we get, if we interview 100 people, upwards of a dozen of them are part of a couples match. So it's just really common. I just want to make sure people kind of know that it's really not unusual by any means. I don't want to do it. Okay, what about the odds of matching? So people, so this is where my data comes from. NRMP puts out a results and data every year, and this is the most recent one. And I've got a few things where I've taken data from multiple spots. Now this, I don't really want you to look at this, but this is how many ranked applicants are needed to fill each position. And that is, so let's say we're matching for 5 people in our residency program. How far down the match list do we go, divided by how many people we had? So if we went down to 21 and we were matching for 7, we went 3 per opening. If we went down to 70, it was 10 per opening. So the bigger that number, it means the further down places are going down their rank list. I think it's interesting. So radiology is at 7.2, and I just highlighted the programs that go to a bigger number. First of all, there's not very many of them. Anesthesia, primary care medicine, categorical pediatrics, primary care pediatrics, and radiation oncology, which goes to 7.3, so almost exactly the same. Every other specialty on here doesn't go as far down their list. So what that's telling you is that radiology residency programs go very far down their list. You don't need to see the numbers, but just so you know, I mean, there's a few really big, I mean, we're talking about pediatrics, medicine, huge programs, are the only ones that are going further down the list. So it just gives you an idea that maybe radiology is not as competitive as some people lead you to believe. This is an interesting graph. So I've been tracking this data for a while now, going back to 2009. These are the number of radiology spots in the match and the number of those spots that are filled by graduating U.S. seniors. So people at a U.S. medical school filling the spots. And you can see they're diverging. I mean, there's more and more spots, and there are fewer of these spots. This is just radiology. Fewer of those spots being filled by U.S. medical school graduates. So it's an interesting statistic. More spots, fewer people here going into it. So, I mean, the odds of matching radiology are actually quite good. People sometimes worry about that. But here's another bit of data. So these are U.S. seniors. The U.S. line are U.S. seniors. That's the line, of course, that we care about. How did they do in the match? So I highlighted radiology here. In the column I wanted to look at here is the percent that didn't match. So people going into radiology, what percent of them did not match? And the percent there is actually right here, 1.3% of the residents. And if you actually compare that to the other specialties, other than these zeros, which are basically nobody applying and going into anything, there's only one specialty in all of medicine where a smaller number of people don't match, meaning more people going into radiology match percentage-wise than any other specialty except anesthesiology. It's the only one on here. So, I mean, you might have in your mind certain specialties you think are more competitive or less competitive. But other than anesthesia, people who do better are more likely to match in radiology than they are in those other spots. I don't think a lot of people realize that. This number has actually been true. People were about to lock me up even like 5 years ago. The number was about the same. And in fact, the year I was giving this talk, like 2011, and people thought radiology was so competitive. And that year, anesthesia was even bigger, and we were the lowest number of all. And I would say, see, radiology is the least competitive specialty in all medicine. People thought I was insane. But these are true numbers. So, I mean, your odds of matching in radiology are better than anything. I mean, think of, I mean, some you know, you look at neurosurgery, it's 19% of the people don't match. Dermatology, 18% of the people don't match. But other, especially internal medicine. I mean, who doesn't go into internal medicine? 1.5. I mean, you're more likely to not match if you're going into internal medicine than radiology. Just thought I'd show. This is just raw numbers of people, U.S. seniors going into radiology who don't match. You know, this is, so when it says 60, that's 60 people. I mean, 60 actual residents, 60 human beings. These numbers are, and 10 is here, these are single digit numbers. Nationwide, not matching who go into radiology. It's right off the NRMP. So, odds of matching, really very good. Okay, so people, I think there's a lot of confusion out there that it's really hard to match into radiology. So I'd just like people to know that. All right, what about application data? So this is some info I get from a different publication of the NRMP. They don't put this out every year. This one came out in 2014. They do it about every 2 or 3 years. They'll put out one of these. And they get into a little more detail about each individual specialty and give you some statistics. Some of these things I think you might find interesting. Some of them, I think one of the take-home points is that some of these things in radiology aren't as important as you might think. Okay, here's a chart they give a number of research projects, and the big bar, well, I mean the dark blue bar, I guess, is the people that match into radiology, and then the little bar is Lyndon. So the people who had no research projects applying to radiology, 46 of them matched, and 1 didn't. People who did 1 research project, this is on their application, so it could be, you know, it could have been 12 years working in Sandia National Laboratory, or it could have been a weekend. You don't really know. But I mean, the people that had 1 research project, 92 matched, 5 didn't. So, and people with 5 or more, 146 matched, 2 didn't. So, I mean, you could calculate the percentages here, but the reality is, it doesn't really have much of an effect on whether you match or not. I mean, this person did a lot, these 2 people did a lot of research, but you know, this person did not. It doesn't matter. Similar lines, number of abstracts. So you can also list not just what research you're working on, but what have you published, what have you presented, da 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 da. Exact same. So people that did no abstracts, no presentations, no publications. 121 of them matched, 4 didn't. Same thing, all the way down to the people that did 5 or more. You know, 240 matched, 2 didn't. So really, again, very little effect on whether you're going to match or not. Number of work experiences, same story. So work experience is pretty vague. I mean, it could be you did a orthopedic surgery residency, but it could be something outside of medicine. But again, very little effect. This is not true at all the other specialties. So, you know, some other specialties, some of these things have a bigger effect, but essentially doesn't have a big effect on whether you're going to match. Volunteer experiences. Of the people that did no volunteer, they all matched. So, the people that did 10 or more, 2 of them didn't match. I don't think I think that the take-home point is, but it gives you also an idea. If you look through these, if you spend some time on these statistics, you can kind of see where people are. So these are just actual numbers from actual applications. The NRMP, so they have the actual exact numbers. It's not like a survey or anything. I mean, you can kind of see, you know, most people have about 4 or 5 things. You can kind of see it almost looks like a bell curve. So it's also, spend some time, you know, look at these charts. You can kind of see maybe where you fit in. A couple other things. AOA. People who were not AOA, 567 matched, 10 didn't. People who were, 2 didn't, 150 did. So again, very little effect. Medical school, one of the 40 highest NIH funding. Here it might be good because they all matched, but pretty much all these people did too, right? All but 12. PhD degree, only 12 people without a PhD didn't match. Okay, so that's all right. Okay, so that's just kind of some things in there. I think people stress. I think my point is people stress about a lot of those things. Oh, I don't have enough research. I don't have enough this and that. Really, the statistics. This is it. These are the people. This is everybody. It's not a survey. So, again, I tell people not to stress too much about step 1 scores, and then step 2. These are really difficult for program directors because like half the applicants don't have step 2 scores. So what are you gonna, you know? So these are used even less, I think. But it's the same story, right? The 2 people who had between 191 and 200 on step 2 matched, whereas, you know, these two people between 251, 260. So it's, again, not hugely worth stressing about. And then, I don't know, I had this one little thing, I don't know if this is something that Match puts in a lot of their data. They think it's really important. It's number of contiguous ranks. It's basically how many programs did you rank. They say contiguous because you might do radiology, and then internal medicine, and then so you can't really. So they can only look at like how many contiguous radiology. But most people, it's all radiology, right? Or it's all whatever you're going into. And they like to make this point on a lot of different things, and I'm sure it's true. So this is basically the number of programs you rank, and what your probability of matching into radiology is. And so the top line is U.S. senior, so again, that's the one we care about. But they both, this is independent applicants, so that includes people from non-U.S. medical schools. It also includes people that have graduated and are in another specialty and want to switch into radiology. Of course, they both approach pretty close to perfectly matching. But basically, you start to talk, I mean, the 95% point is 6 or 7 programs ranked. You get to 10 or 11 ranked, and it's almost a guaranteed thing, basically. All right, so that's the, sort of what are my chances of matching. I think the take-home point is that they are really, really good. It's really not hard to match into radiology. So the secret data now is when they poll program directors and say, well, how do you use this data in terms of deciding who to interview and deciding how to rank people? Because now, that's matching is one thing, but how do I get, the place to interview? And again, you don't need to look at all this data, but I want to highlight the things that are the most, so they say, do you use this, and if you use it, how important it is. So it's a kind of a weird graph, but I just the 4 things that came up as the most important to the program directors for how do you select who to interview. Step 1 score, so it matters to them in terms of getting an interview. Your dean's letter, grades in your clerkships, and your class rank. Those are all things that they think are important. Grades and clerkships and dean's letters are pretty closely tied because one of the main contents of your dean's letter is the stuff about how you did in your clerkship. Usually it's a little more narrative and so it's a little more useful. And 91% of people said the dean's letter versus 76 is the grades. Yeah. But what I want to show things that are not that important, I try to pluck them out for you. Personal statement, perceived commitment to specialty. I think a lot of people think they need to show I'm really interested in radiology, even though honors in clerkship and desired specialist. So what was your grade in radiology? That's not really that. We know that the clerkships aren't that big a deal and aren't that good at sorting people out. So that didn't really matter. Demonstrated involvement and interest in research, very low. So that's not really high on people's list. Interested in academic career, again, we get this all the time. People pretend like they're really interested in academics, so they think it's really important. And doing an away rotation at another institution, really very unimportant in the eyes of the program directors in terms of who they're going to interview. So they ask this question: do you require step 1 scores before you offer someone an interview? And if so, do you use a cutoff, meaning we don't interview people below a cutoff? Everybody said they require step 1 scores. 86% said they had a target score, meaning they do use a cutoff. 14% said no, we only care that they passed. Then they ask a question: would your program consider applicants who failed the exam on the first attempt? 52% said never, 45% said seldom, and 3% said often. Which is interesting because if you notice from the data, there was nobody on the thing that was at 0, so I don't know how you could often apply when nobody had failed last year, but people went into radiology. So anyway, that tells you an idea of where people are on that. And so then they ask the question of, well, what is your cutoff? And so they tried to make this, this is the bar here. So the question was, where do you generally not grant an interview? So this is sort of the main range. I think it's the 25th to 75th percentile. So that range is from 210 to, it's not quite getting up to 230. So that's sort of the main range that people use. I think it's the median was about 220, and then the X is the mean. We're going to do a little statistics here, which is a little bit below that, maybe around 218 of programs. And this was, it was a step 2, but remember, not as many people used that. It's a similar, slightly lower range. which is interesting because scores are generally a little bit higher on stuff too. And they said, well, what are scores above which you almost always grant an interview? And then these range from, again, the bar 220 to about 240. It's the cutoff. If you're above that, you almost always get an interview. The median is 230, and the mean just above that. So kind of what they're saying is a lot of programs between 210 and 228 or so use a cutoff. You're not likely to get an interview. Above, depending on the program, 220 to 240, you're very likely to get an interview. Okay, so that's getting an interview. Okay, so it seems like your grades, and you're sitting there thinking, that's kind of a lot. It's all done deal, right? I mean, and I think that is true. I think a lot of people stress. It's sort of the end of your third year, and you're getting your application together. You start stressing, but the reality is a lot of it's in the books. I mean, and think about it. You've spent 3 years in medical school doing stuff, being evaluated. People are seeing you every single day. You took the step one scores. I mean, a lot of it's in the books. You're not going to be able to, add or subtract too much from your record there. Okay, what about getting a high rank? So how do I get ranked high? Okay, now I got an interview, so that's good. But, they interviewed 100 people, and I want to get as high up on that list as possible. So what were the factors? Again, we've got this crazy chart. But you're going to see there's a difference. So the things that were the most important to the program directors in terms of how people got ranked after they got an interview: interactions with faculty during interview and visit, interpersonal skills, interaction with house staff during interview and visit, and feedback from current residents. So think about that. All of the things that are showing up at the top of the list in terms of how you get ranked on the ranked list are related to things that happen during the interview day. It's almost as if once you get the interview, clean slate, and it's a lot's riding on the interview, I think is something to think about. I don't want you to stress about it, but that's really what's going to matter once you get that interview is how does the interview go according to them. The things that were not that important to the program directors that I highlighted: personal prior knowledge of the applicant, volunteer extracurricular experiences, demonstrated involvement and interest in research, same kind of things that weren't important before. Other post-interview contact, I think some people think they can game the system by doing stuff after the interview, doesn't help. Second interviews or visits, almost 8% of the people thought that was useful, meaning 92% said it played no role. Those are things I think that sometimes people think are important, but really they're not. I mean, really what matters is what happens on that day. I don't have a lot about it. They interview the applicants too, which is kind of interesting, but that's you all, so you might not care about the other applicants. But I just thought I'd highlight two things from this, because I think this is shown year after year, and it's not unique to radiology. What's the number one thing for people selecting what programs to apply to? Geographic location. We've seen that time and time again. And then what's the number one thing in terms of how do applicants rank their programs? Overall goodness of fit. And I think, talking to a lot of people, there's sort of a gestalt. There's kind of a feeling you get when you've been to a place. But the interesting thing is that comes from your interview day too. So the interview day is going to be really important to you, because that's largely going to be what they're going to come away thinking about you, and it's also going to be how you come away thinking about that program. And you're going to get the most important thing, at least according to surveys of medical students who just went through the match. I mean, the most important thing to them was basically, how did it feel? Did I feel like it was a good fit when I was at that program? So the interview day is really is an important thing you want to think about. Okay, we're doing it. Vanderbilt, I don't have a lot to say. People ask us a little bit about how does Vanderbilt work, so I just thought I'd throw some of the things out there. Number of people kind of coming through. I mean, a little bit bigger total number of people, but sort of the same fraction of people doing IR as we always had. All slots filled through the match. That's actually a new rule last couple of years, that if you want to fill any spots through the match, you got to fill them all through the match. So there's no back doors for people. We never had them, but other places did. Occasionally, right, so we've had, it hasn't actually happened in a while, there are some opportunities, people want to do your research. I love to meet with people that are interested in radiology, always happy to do it. I don't have a lot of time, I could talk for an hour just about our program, I think it's so cool and great. We've got some really interesting things we get to do with leadership development. our motto here is leaders, not readers. You know, we really want to train the next generation of radiology leaders. So we have some unique and fun things people can do in their 4th year of the DR residency program that we can talk about some other time. And we're really interested in thinking about radiology as the specialty that uses technology to help patients. It's not just an imaging field. There's a lot of new technologies around the corner that we want to incorporate into our practice and have them housed in radiology, because we are the experts in technology and advancement and how we can use that for patients. So it's a very exciting place to be. I think interviews, we never offer, I get this question all the time, but some places, especially before Dean's Letters moved to October 1st, they used to come out November 1st, but we never offer interviews before the Dean's Letters come out. Grades, what's in the Dean's Letter, those are some of the most important things that program directors say, how they decide who to interview, so how could you possibly decide before that? We get about 600 applications a year. About 75% of them are from U.S. senior people. So there is nobody who's like, there's no value where you say, well, you know, most of these people are going to get an interview, because we can only, for such a big department, we're kind of a small program. I mean, there's departments